Jeez. We are, this is something that we do at budget time. We have a discussion of the fiscal year budget and with the Board of Education. And so this is our Town Council and Board of Ed workshop on the budget. This is does not have public comment. We just have the Board of Education present their budget to us. So this is discussion of fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and capital improvement plan as proposed by the Town Manager and Superintendent. And this budget can be viewed on the website, Town's website, proposed budget for FY 2024. The proposed capital improvement plan can be viewed on the following link on the Town's website, proposed capital improvement plan FY 2024 through 35. The proposed West Hartford Public Schools proposed budget can be viewed at the following link on the West Hartford Public School website, budget information. And there's just this one item on the budget. And so we can do a roll call. Thank you, Ms. Khan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll begin with Councilor Blanks.
Present.
Mayor Cantor.
Here.
Councilor Cortez.
Here.
Councilor Fay is joining by phone. Councilor Fay. There we go. Got it. Thank you. Councilor McGinnis.
Here.
Councilor Poland.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Sweeney.
Here.
Councilor Winograd.
Here.
Councilor Zandanowits.
Here.
Thank you. And the council is joined by Dr. Lorna Thomas Farquharson and Ms. Claire Nazarella.
Here. Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Okay. So we are going to just, thank you for all of your work and for the commitment that you make to the town. And I just left Norfolk School for they had a STEM fair that was incredibly inspiring, and 4th and 5th graders that did really remarkably creative projects and learned so much. And it's always inspiring. Being in our schools. So I just want to, again, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for the commitment to the schools. And it has been, no question, a really, really challenging time over the last 3 years. And we know that those times are not done, and that our students are all, at all different levels of students, not just students in our public schools, but also college students, have felt a significant impact from the pandemic. And we know everybody is trying as hard as they can to recover some lost experiences and time. That's difficult. But again, we appreciate that. So, and not only our students, but our seniors and so many people, but we are focused on the schools today. So, all right. So would you like to, I'm going to kick it over to you, Ms. Thomas Farquharson, and you chair, and you can introduce yourself and start the presentation.
Certainly. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Again, it's quite an honor to be here, and I'm here with our fellow colleague, Claire Nazarella-Taylor, and Ari Steinberg. Dr. Ari Steinberg sends her apologies. She is under the weather. She's our vice chair and was not able to be here today as planned, but nonetheless, we are in full capacity with Claire here. I also must acknowledge our former board members. Good to see you again, Mr. Zanowitz, yes, and Ms. Poling, yes, and Carol Anderson-Blanks. It's it's like a reunion, quite an expanded from last year up until now. So nonetheless, glad to be here. Before we begin, do want to pass out to you, if you can pass this, thank you, sure, just what we'll be discussing and reviewing. And again, we look forward to sharing with you what has been presented to us by our superintendent for the upcoming school year. As you know, or just to remind where we are in our process, we did have the formal presentation of the budget. We did have our first and second budget workshop. And our next meeting on this coming Tuesday is when we will discuss and formally vote on what has been proposed or anything that may be modified with that. And then we know from there we pass it to you all. Yeah. Oh. One more. All right. Certainly. Two more? All right. Certainly.
Mary, I'm sure that you will be able to have this by email, right?
Sure, but there's another one here, hard copy if you would like.
No, I'm just for Mary,
Yes,
yeah.
okay, Mary, oh, yes, yes. And this also is on our website, so what you're seeing here is what also was shared with us when it was presented by Dr. Annie Murrow.
Okay, so it should be on the Board of Ed website,
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
All right. So just to begin, going to the first slide and just giving a sense of where we are, who we are. I don't think we can ever reiterate this enough in terms of the wonderful students who make up our school system and the parents and families that make it up as well. As we see in terms of the students, we have just over 9,100 students within the district. From pre-K to post-secondary, I want to emphasize the post-secondary because many think that, oh, come 18 or 19, one graduates and they move on. But we're very proud of our post-secondary program, which accommodates students up until 21, 22, where just continue to flourish their skills and helping them to become successful adults thereafter. If you have not had a chance to visit, certainly you have heard of the Next Chapter Bookstore, which is run and led by our students in post-secondary program. In terms of those that come from non-English, where English is not their primary language, over 2,000 students. In terms of students of color, over 45%. Want to pause and highlight that as well, because we often talk about the diversity of our town, and it's important to recognize how diverse it is. And also when we talk about how well our school system is, it's all of these entities that help to make it great and vibrant and prosperous and receive the accolades that we receive, not only statewide, but nationally. In terms of the students who receive eligible for free and reduced lunch, that's 26%. That also is very important to note, and we'll make reference to that once again. 26% of students within our district qualify for free and reduced lunches. 26%. However, we continue to thrive, we continue to do well, and these students also help to make our system as vibrant as it is. And then 17.6% of our students receive special education services. We know that we are a destination community. There are families that have relocated specifically to be a part of our school system because they know the quality education that we provide for all of our students, regardless of the needs that they may have academically. Moving on to the next slide, giving some information how we are compared to our DRG, Demographic Reference Group. And as we know, West Hartford is compared to all of those towns that you see listed at the bottom of the slide, from Avon, Brookfield, Cheshire, all the way down. Those are the towns that we are compared to. However, again, referencing how diverse our community is, the diversity of our community is not as reflective as the towns that you see here. Nonetheless, we continue to do well and continue to thrive. It also is important to note, in terms of the net current expenditure per pupil, that routinely, when we're compared to other districts, we routinely have spent less than other districts when it comes to our expenditures. When you think back to the 2017-18 school year, in comparison to the Dirk B, we were at 9.9 million less than the comparison town, and compared to the state, it was 5.2%. The following year, again, about a little over 9% less than. And that has continued. This year, we are pretty much at about the same amount, and there are many reasons that contribute to that. But nonetheless, important to know that we continue to deliver quality education, even when compared to these other districts who also deliver quality education. But our presentation is a bit different in terms of the diversity that we offer and we provide. The next slide gives a budget category breakdown. And as you can see, the different categories from general insurance, contractual professional, utilities, all other, transportation, tuition, salaries and benefits, that takes up the bulk of it. Salaries and benefits comprise about 82% of the budget. And why is that? That's because we are a people-driven organization. People-driven organization. It's important to know that we invest in those who we believe are investing in our future generation of leaders. Going on to I'll pause for a brief moment here to receive any questions you may have from what has been shared so far, or we can receive them all at the end.
I think we can wait until, and no one here is shy, so if they feel like they have a question, I'm sure I'll know about it. Thank you.
All right. So on the next slide, giving the 2023-2024 budget summary. The adopted budget, as you see, is $181,187,018. If we were to roll forward the budget, in other words, if everything we're doing now, if we just rolled that into next year, that would be about a 6% increase. However, when you account for different changes that have been recommended, the net increase is about a 4.8% increase. So in totality, what is being proposed for the budget is $189,941,121. Now, it's important to know that, yes, what has been proposed thus far is a 4.8% increase. However, the average increase statewide is 5.2%. So again, we are continuing to be under what is the state average. It's also important to note that of the 32 districts that have reported so far in terms of their budgets, their average is about 5.17%. So again, greater than what we are proposing, what has been proposed. And in terms of the average 6 DIRG B districts that have reported, their average percentage increase is about 4.8%, very close in line with what has been proposed to us as well. And there's some things also to take into account when we think of the budget. And we think of the consumer price index, inflation. That is something that is impacting all communities, all towns, all states. And those are things just can't do much about. It is what it is. So that has greatly increased as well. The consumer price index is about 6.41% as of January of this year, per the Connecticut Department of Labor website. And that is something that also contributes to the prices that you see. And certainly when our capital improvement plan was voted on, that accounted for those increases also. So in terms of the modifications, again, we shared the number if there were complete rollover, but then we also noted deductions that were recommended. So the enrollment changes include, the modifications include enrollment changes, scheduling efficiencies, special education, funding reallocation, and non-classroom changes. So in total, there are about a little over $2 million in total modifications that have been proposed. In terms of enrollment changes, in terms of the classroom sections, that applies to about 3. For elementary specials, about 1.05. For middle school enrollment, about 6. Middle school is 2, high school is 6. About total of 12.05. And for scheduling efficiencies, also in terms of elementary instructional music, 1, secondary reading supervision, 1, and gifted and talented, 0.9, and that's about a difference of 2.9%. And then special education as well, as it relates to occupational therapist, an addition of 1, speech and language pathologist, an addition of 1, intensive academic teacher, addition of 1, resource teacher, addition of 2, and teacher assistants, modifying that by 8. So the net is 3. In terms of funding reallocation, looking for 1 as it pertains to the math coach, and 6 as it pertains to paraprofessionals to Title I. And for non-classroom changes, 1 for secretary, 5 for paraprofessionals, 1 for printer, 1 for librarian, and 0.3 for assistant principal, for a total of 8.3. So what does all of this mean? It means that in terms of trying to modify the budget, these are the primary areas where it has been noted. But it's important to know that when it comes to making suggested modifications, the administrative team is very focused on not wanting it to directly impact the classroom or the students, that is. And so consideration has been put into that, and I imagine there's some questions that will rely, or rather want to look further into what has been shared thus far. But as we go to the next slide in terms of the summary overall, the proposed budget totals $189,941,121, which is an increase of $8.75 million over the current year. This represents an increase of 4.8% from the Board of Education's 2022-2023 adopted budget. While the increase is higher than typical years, it is consistent with districts across the state who are facing the same challenges we are. This budget adds no new programs, but maintains class size guidelines, the team structure at the middle schools, and challenging courses at the high schools. The budget preserves counseling support, programs and services to meet the needs of all learners, and a commitment to the arts. Reflects wage adjustments for teachers negotiated by a bipartisan committee and adopted unanimously by the Board of Education. Reduces 33.25 positions in the general fund due to enrollment changes, scheduling efficiencies, revised staffing models, funding reallocation, and non-classroom changes. It is $2.1 million lower than a roll-forward budget. It makes full use of ESSER funds, with a focus on student learning recovery and student mental health. And it maintains the quality of education that West Hartford Public Schools are renowned for. So collectively, we know that we are here to share with you what has been proposed. We, again, will have our meeting on Tuesday to discuss and to make comments and so on and so forth, and then vote. And whatever that vote number is will be presented to all of you for you to make the final decision. Whatever that may be, I must say what is a calming thought is to know that, yes, we are here to say this is what we're looking for, but we all know collectively we're here for the same shared purpose, and that is our students. That is not only they're educating them now, but wanting to ensure that they are doing well moving forward. And I have yet to hear anyone here not publicly talk about how well our school system is. So we know it is mutually beneficial to look at this in a holistic way. So with that, we'll pause and receive questions as they may come.
Thank you so much. And I just do want to, for the public, understand our role. As a council, we are the governing body of the schools. The Board of Education is the governing body of the schools. We have the approval, overall bottom line approval of a number, it's approving a number, whether it is this number or some other number that is included in our budget. So that is our role. We don't, if we were to say that, the budget, we accept the budget as is, then that's fine. If we were to say we're reducing the budget by $1 million, then it's up to the Board of Education to decide how that happens. So again, that is our role. We don't manage the school. We cannot, by state statute, manage the school board budget. So I know there are some board members, past board members, that know the budget in and out, the school budget, much more so than us as to town councilors do. So I just want to make sure the public understands that role. I also want to just highlight that we have the state, the town, both the town side and the Board of Education side have benefited from resources that were from the American Rescue Plan. That money will run out. It will end in 2026, right? The end 2025-26 year, right? No, 24-25 year. And for us, we have to expend it by 26, I think, for the town. But it is it will not be here. And so we had a discussion in our budget last night about some positions that are included in our ARPA funds that we are relooking at and seeing if we can reduce some other things in the budget to include those, because for the positions that we want to make sure that we preserve, that's really important that we structurally put it in our budget and not dig a hole. So I just would offer that as a cautionary cautionary item that, if we don't want to dig a hole for the following year when we're doing our budget. So especially as maybe new contracts come up as well. So we just want to make sure that we're aware and understanding of that. I will also say.
Oh, I'm sorry, may I respond to that?
Sure.
I'm so glad you said that. Thank you. I anticipated that coming out through discussion, but since you already went there with it, want to follow with that, if I may, because that has been a primary topic of discussion throughout, even from last year's budget process, recognizing that at some point in time, the ESSER funding, who we're so thankful that we were able to receive it, but it would end, and that will create a budget cliff. And what can we do to try to help modify that? Because we know, as we know, when it came to use of the ESSER funding, it was specifically used or had to be allocated for those things manifesting directly from the pandemic. And there certainly were many, many things that came about from the pandemic. And there were things that were exacerbated by the pandemic because they were present prior to. And so I appreciate you sharing that, because those are things we certainly are taking into account, because although there is an end date for when ESSER funding can be used, there's no clear end date for when the challenges we've seen thus far will conclude. They're going to likely continue. So appreciate that mindset of how to plan, be forward thinking with our planning.
It's definitely for one of the mindsets that we at the town, and it hasn't, for the most part, we have done one-time things that we're not going to be ongoing, and I know that's much harder when we're all in the people business, but that's going to be an important discussion and something that we really have to be very conscious about and conscientious about. Okay, and the other thing that has impacted both the board and the town is, and here it's very easy to see the benefits line, was our state partnership plan increase in for a few years that the board has been on the state partnership plan. You've seen little to no increase, and this is a big jump for all of us. So something that we're all facing. That insurance cost is still a little bit less than I think the CPI of the rise in insurance of healthcare costs, but it's substantial to us. So anyway, so I just want to make sure that and then another thing that I know that school systems, as you said, that Dirk B and the state are facing, as well as tuition and utility increases. That's true, again, on the town side and the utility piece, but also on the tuition. That is something all schools are experiencing. So something that we just want to communicate. But I will open it up to my colleagues and Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Madam Chair. It is a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for what you do for our schools. Our schools are, as you've heard me talk to you about this numerous times, what makes the town amazing and what has made it kind of grow the way it is. And I think there was a great article the other day where the town manager was named in it about what's going to happen with all this growth in town. And it was great to see both the town and the school on the same page of, well, we can absolutely handle growth here and we're going to do it the right way. And I think the numbers that are reflected here, when I tell this, because I work a lot in the education space, and I tell people about the diversity that we have here. And I think people don't understand that, right? Because I think there's a lot of trends that are happening here in town that are really quite impressive in regards to the rest of the state, where we have a high-performing district with such diversity in both backgrounds and income, which are like the big factors that we see in education that really determine people's outcomes. And because of that, I think there's just like a couple of things that have been brought to my attention through a bunch of emails, because we get all the emails now. Everyone gets everything from just about. It's a small town, but it feels big. So one of the things was, I know that over the last couple of years there's been a conversation about pay to play, and I just kind of wanted to understand, kind of not getting into the actual number, but kind of the idea of the policy and how I've heard a lot of that from constituents, and you and I have talked about this, but kind of what is the board's kind of idea with this policy overarching, and is that something that's going to exist? Because I know that, as the mayor was talking about with ARPA funding, that was something that was considered, and it was really awesome to see you guys do that. So that's just one. I'll put that in park for a minute, and then the other one that recently has come through lots of emails is on some of the STEM stuff that's going on. This is more your space than mine, but I think I wanted you to have the opportunity to talk about that, because I think we've all received a bunch of emails on that, and I think that it's only fair for you to be able to kind of address that policy, because I think we're all getting those emails in light of this meeting. So just wanted to throw those all out to you, and again, appreciate you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you so much, and we appreciate all that you do and all of the other teammates do as well. So I'll start with pay to play. I think a quick short answer is, we all collectively wish there was no pay to play. We wish that students did not have to pay for that. But the reality is they do, and that predates this current time period and dates back many, many, many years, thinking back to even 2004, where there was the pay-to-play. And as we know, the purpose for that is to offset the costs and the expenses that it is for students to participate in different athletic and sporting events, from the athletic director, the coaches, the staff, transportation fees, all of those pieces. And so for years, there has been a pay-to-play, where a child who wants to participate in a sport has to pay that. We did experience in 2021, 2022, when we received ESSER funding, that we were able to apply about $400,000 of ESSER funding to pay to play, and therefore for that period of time, no student had to pay to play. So it was wonderful, it was great. However, during the remainder of that year, going into the following year, as we learned more of the impact of the pandemic, as we learned more of what was not only being present now, but what we were concerned about continuing to unfold, was the learning loss of our students and mental health concerns, the mental health challenges of the students. We did not know the potential severity of that at the original time when ESSER funding fully was put in place, completely covering pay-to-play. But as time continued to move on and we learned more of how impacted our young people are, and they continue to be. At our last Board of Ed meeting, we had a presentation from our Pupil Services Director, giving information about where we are in terms of how we're responding to our students. And what is an unfortunate reality is, prior to the pandemic, there already was an increase of challenges of students that were needing special education services, and also in terms of their social, emotional, and mental supports needing that. That was prior to the pandemic. Once the pandemic hit, that increased all the more. And so that is why there was a pivot of using the ESSER funding. And initially it was having half of it to continue to go towards the pay-to-play, and to have the other half of it to go towards getting mental health supports for our students in the classroom. In particular in the elementary classrooms. We were able to use that funding to provide positions for staffing to support the mental health needs of our students. And so in 2021, instead of it being the full amount of ESSER going towards the pay-to-play, we had about 290,000, little over, about 218,000 rather, that is, of ESSER funding that went towards pay-to-play, and about 290,000 was towards pay-to-play, and there was a $100 amount per sport at a $400 cap. So each $400 cap per household. So $100 per sport, but if a household reached $400, then that was the cap. That is where we currently are. And what is been proposed, or rather for next year, is the full amount to go back in. But I want to be clear also in saying, because as wonderful as putting the ESSER funding in for pay-to-play, we can't forget that ESSER funding was time limited. So inevitably, we would be in this position of what's going to happen to pay-to-play, which is why I wanted to start off by saying, ideally, we wish there was no pay-to-play. So there is a quick fix. That is, in our budget, increasing it by $500,000. That will take care of it. If we increase our budget by $500,000, that will take care of pay-to-play, and that will be an ease for many. But until that becomes a reality for us, this is where we are. And again, it has to be highlighted that what the funding was in support of, and that was the mental health supports of our children and addressing the learning loss as well. That was the first part. And the second question, or any questions or comments? Because we have two parts to your questions, but in terms of pay-to-play, any other questions or comments?
I would like to add that there is a waiver on the forms page for any sport. So any student that signs up, there's a waiver section, and there could be different reasons for a waiver, but it specifically states if you receive free and reduced lunch. So any of the, was it 26% that receive free and reduced lunch automatically have a waiver. There's no one to speak to. There's no app, it's a form you fill out. You don't need to speak to the coach, and you don't have to pay the fee.
And thank you, Claire, for saying that, because in terms of the current year, we have about 2,600 students that participate in sports. And of those students, about 238 have requested the fee waiver that Claire just made reference to. And about 96, that is, families met the cap of the $400 per year and did not have to pay any additional fees. So again, it's important to know that no child is turned away if they cannot afford to pay for this.
Thank you for that. I think that's part of why I wanted to ask, because I think there's a lot of misconception going on out there, and I know it's been interesting time to serve on the Board of Ed right now, as it is here. But I just wanted to hear that. That's fantastic. 'Cause actually, that brings us kind of to our committee, Councilor Poland, where we were talking about this issue as well, where I think the town was requiring people to go in person to waive fees that they would be eligible for. And one of the things that we were saying, and I think we talked about this before the budget, but it was like that process is humbling to a lot of people, right? And I think as a community we've tried to do is make ourselves much more accommodating to all backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds. And I think that's fantastic to hear, because what we're trying to do now is remove that process for people, so if they have it, they can either call, they don't have to physically go in. At one point we were having people come in and physically request that, and I think that it's interesting you'd have to do that, because those folks would probably be between the hours of 9 to 5, which is difficult for parents who are working at that hour. But thank you for that, and yeah, just end on the STEM stuff. That would be great.
Certainly, yes. So we certainly have received a lot of feedback and thoughts regarding what has been proposed for Smith STEM School, which we'll say on one hand, it's wonderful to know that people are attentive and advocate for what they advocate. If you were at our meeting yesterday, you would not have been able to find a seat in the back there. It was filled not only with adults, but with children, young people, speaking on their behalf. So what has been proposed for the magnet position? I'm saying proposed because, again, we have not discussed and we have not voted on the budget and what is contained within it. So currently, in terms of our magnet positions, we know our magnet schools are Smith and Charter Oak International Academy. And at Smith, we have 3 magnet positions, one of them being a STEM coordinator, a science teacher, and a math teacher. At Charter Oak International Academy, we have 2 magnet positions, an IB coordinator and a media and tech teacher. What has been proposed from the superintendent's budget is at Smith, the STEM coordinator and the science teacher to merge that into one position. The math teacher would remain, and then at Charter Oak, those 2 positions are there. And it's twofold as to why that was being proposed. One was efficiency, to try to be more efficient with the time, space management of what is required for that position. Also equity as well. Because mentioned how at STEM there are 3 magnet positions. However, at Charter Oak there are 2. However, at Charter Oak there are over 150 more students that are there. So more students, but fewer magnet positions. And so that was the rationale for the proposal being made. We very much appreciated hearing what the teachers and rather the students were sharing yesterday, because we know Smith is a great school. It's a great school, and there's no intent to, there's no position being cut. So if the question is, if you're merging that position, what happens to that one body? Well, that is a person that would go into the classroom. They would have a position in the classroom. So there is no position being cut. It's just trying to condense, modify to be more efficient with what is provided within the school setting there, and to be equitable in the process. But again, that's what was proposed. Come Tuesday night, we will see where we are. And then when we bring it to you all will really let us know.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for your answers, and hopefully we see this session, the legislature provide West Hartford with some additional money as well as the rest of the state. There's a lot of momentum on that up at the Capitol, and we keep our fingers crossed for that.
And if I may piggyback, yes. And we still will have this line of communication and conversation. Why? We know that there on the horizon is House Bill 5003, yes, which is intended to increase more of the educational cost sharing. We know for years we have not received our fair share. We do a lot, but we certainly need more for that. And if we were to think hypothetically, if we were to receive that increase in cost sharing funding, it still wouldn't quite be enough. We'd appreciate it, we want it, we welcome it, but we still have ways to go. But yes, thank you for bringing that up, indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Thank you, Ms. Thomas Sarkison. Can I just confirm, you said, 250 students that were on free and reduced from the 2,500, so it's about 10% of the...
238.
238, okay, so a little less than 250. Okay, thank you. All right, any questions over? I just want to make sure that we're not monopolizing. Mr. Cortez? Oh, okay, well, let Ms. Fay go. Go ahead. That's okay. I'm going to let you go. I'm just moving the mic. Hold on one second.
Thank you. As you know, my 88-year-old dad is in the hospital with COVID, and I have diagnosis now too. So in full protection of everybody else around the table, I was not able to be there in person, and I love this meeting, and I'm really sorry I'm not there. No surprises to anybody, because I asked this question at the last BOE budget session on the council. And before I ask my question, I love our education system. My daughter is a participant in 8th grade at KP, and she's excelling and doing wonderful things, and I'm very proud of our education system. But wearing my finance hat, I have to ask this question, and you guys will not be surprised because I asked it last time. So my question is more about the taxpayers and the budget and how it fits in. So I'm proud that we take in open choice children from various communities into ours, which is wonderful. My daughter's friends will touch them. It's fantastic. But we spend $20,000 a year to educate our children. And it's a good investment. I have no problem with that. I come from a family of educators. But how many kids are we taking in? And last time I asked this question, and no offense to Lorna, you didn't have the answers, but how many kids do we have, and what was the state reimbursement to us? Because taxpayers have a right to know how much they're subsidizing this program. So if we're spending $20,000 a kid, and the state's reimbursing us $4,000, which was last year's budget. I think it was that, and we have 300 kids or so. You know, we're talking about $3, $4, $5 million. So, can you give me those figures for this year's budget? Because I think, for full transparency, taxpayers need to know that West Hartford, everybody in the town is subsidizing this program. And they need to know the numbers because it's important. And again, no judgment. I'm not qualifying whether we should do it or not, but I want to know the numbers. So, Lorna, if you have them now, I'd like to hear them.
First off, Counselor, I want to say I hope you feel better. Not condolences, but with your aunt who is ill and you were ill, do hope that you feel better.
And we're friends, you know that. It's not a judgment question. It's just a factual question.
No, that's okay, and I receive it well. And first off, in terms of wanting to know the specific numbers, I will have to get back to you on that. I don't have the specific numbers, only because the intent for today was to share our overall budget and to share the purpose behind the budget. And as we know, within the roles of our wonderful partnership, those granular details are ones that we can certainly share offline, but was not anticipating that for this evening. However, we'll respond to the purpose behind your question, and certainly know that it is all of our efforts to be fiscally responsible. However, I think when it comes to recognizing how we qualify being fiscally responsible, we have to have a little grace and mercy when it comes to human beings and children. And when it comes to our open choice program, that is in fact who we're talking about. We're talking about children. We're talking about children that may be in a setting, an environment where they're able to optimize their learning from our wonderful school system.
I understand all this. I'm not discussing the pros or cons of the program. I wish everybody, I said this last time on the record, I wish everybody had a fantastic West Hartford education. I really do. But I think taxpayers need to know what they are subsidizing to do this. Because I get, for all these wonderful accolades and emails that you guys get, I get a million about the cost and the seniors. They can't live here. It's too expensive. They need to know the facts. And if we make a decision
Mary, we can. I think you made your point, and this is not the point of this meeting, and you're not here.
Well,
so, okay.
It's a number.
Yes,
it's a number.
and she gave you an answer.
Number.
Mary, she provided you an answer, and she'll get back to you.
Okay, so, Mary, wait, I'm sharing my mic. So I took my mic back for a second so we can't hear you. So just hang on for 1 minute. If you looked at the budget, the program budget on page B3, there is an open choice amount. It obviously does not say with the state reimbursement, but it has the number of students on there. So I just wanted to make sure that you saw that. It's 208 last year in 2021-22 and 2003 and 2022-23. 203. 203. What did I say? Oh, sorry. 203. Okay, so all right, so if there's, and so as Ms. Thomas Farquharson said, she will get back to you on details of the state reimbursement amount, and then that's easy to figure out, but,
All right, so Mayor, and I respect everybody around the table. I'm sorry I'm not there. But this is an important fact, and I think taxpayers should know what they're paying for. And this is a big, big number. I mean, last budget cycle.
Mary, it's on,
$1 million.
the mayor just provided you the page
I'll let
number.
it go. All right.
okay, do you have, Ms. Fay, are there any other questions regarding the, for Ms. Thomas Farquharson or Ms. Nasrallah?
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on. Mr. Cortez?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. Thank you for your presentation. I always struggle with the Board of Ed presentation. I got two boys that one currently in high school and one that's gone through the school system in West Hartford who has special needs. So he's been post-secondary. He was in the beginning stages of the bookstore. So I see the stuff that I see the work that's being done, but I continue to have concerns. I've said it in the past, enrollment continues to decline, but yet the cost per pupil continues to increase. We talk about the averages of 5.2%, and you break it down by categories, right? So we're a district reference group B, so that makes us as apples to apples as possible, right? So when you look at a lot of these communities in that group B, yes, the increase is a little bit higher, but unlike us, where we have declines, they have tremendous growth. So you can kind of justify the difference with their increase. I think we don't do enough with this budget. I think the 4.8, every year we're having the same discussions, and it's the same thing. It keeps going up, but the numbers of students keep coming down. So it's kind of hard to justify that. And I understand that they're coming down at a slower rate than the increase. But it's just more questions, there's and you talk about diversity as well, right, and equitable, and I appreciate what you discussed with the magnet schools, and I just wish that we saw that with all the other schools. I feel that we could do a better job with that, because numbers that I don't see is with the diversities, ethnic groups, how are they performing, especially when they go into middle school, high school, are we doing the best we can to make sure with this money that these students and these, and minority ethnic groups are getting the support they need, and how early are we doing that? So I don't see that happening, but yet I see the cost increasing and enrollment going down. Like I said, I struggle with this a lot. I try to pay attention to the numbers throughout the year, especially with other communities, and, it's that 4.8% increase is hard to see. I'd rather no increase, I get it, but there has to be something, and I think that 4.8 is a little high. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez, and I think, yeah, okay. I'm going to go on this side. Ms. Thomas Farquharson, go ahead. You should.
Pardon, just I appreciate what you've shared and respect what you've shared. And want to say, and certainly when it comes to, you hear an increase, it's like, well, why is there an increase? There are some areas where it is beyond our control in terms of what is contributing to the increase. For example, in terms of the total benefit costs are increasing by 8%, and Madam Mayor made reference to this. Pension costs for non-certified staff reflect a slight increase of about $71,000 based upon the board's share of the actuarially determined employer contribution for the town pension plan and prorated share of the debt service and pension obligated bonds issued by the town. You know this. We can't unfortunately control that, but that adds to the increase. Also with respect to transportation and tuition and utilities, this reflects a 12.2% increase. And want to highlight, in terms of transportation, we know that we are obligated not only to provide transportation for those students a part of the public school system, but also those who are private school students as well. And so those inflation, and you consider gas costs and contract, that contributes to the increase also. Yes, the bulk of what we do the bulk of what we do is to try to contribute in a way that's going to optimize the benefits of who we serve. And I'll touch on your piece in terms of diversity, saying, what is happening in terms of the ethnicity of our students? Are we able to track how they're doing, how they're performing? One thing that very glad in terms of what our school system and administration has recognized, when it comes to the achievement gap, we now refer to it and look at it as opportunity gap. Why? Because we realize where there has been an opportunity gap, it has not been defined by race or ethnicity. It's been defined by socioeconomic status. What does that mean? If you don't have the resources that can impact what you have the opportunities to pursue. And so opportunity gap, that is what we're striving to reduce and striving to decrease. And there have been gains with that. Is there still room for growth? Certainly so. But what's important is not to have perfection. It's when you recognize there are areas of growth, you continue to work towards improving them. So appreciate your questions and your comments and concerns. We're still working. We're still working.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cortez. Thank you, Ms. Thomas Ferguson, Dr. Thomas Ferguson. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Dr. Thomas Ferguson and Ms. Nasarella, for all that you're doing with our district and being board members, especially during this time. I recognize that this is a very challenging time to be a board member amongst all the things that you have to deal with in terms of whether it's your meeting, your emails, or just how you manage your responsibilities. So I want to throw that out there as a former board member, former chair. I understand everything that you all are experiencing, especially right now. I can honestly say that this district has prepared my 3 daughters for career readiness. We talk about college and career ready. We also talk about everyone that doesn't necessarily want to go to college. But I can say that with the education preparation that this district provided to my girls, they're doing very well. And they're very proud to be from West Hartford. And interestingly enough, when they talk about where they've been educated, everybody knows about West Hartford schools. So even though that we receive all the advertisement about why we're in our top 10 cities and why West Hartford is a good place to come to, whether it's safety or our districted schools and how we're building our future, we're right on the money. So even though some of this appears a bit challenging, just know at the end of the day, we're all on the right course to doing what we're doing best, which is building a future for the next generation that's coming behind us. So with all that said, I have a couple of questions in terms of the biggest drivers in our budget. And when I say that, I know the personnel line is always large because of contract and the number of our teachers and other districted staff that we have to take care of. But what are some of the other big drivers that we see in the budget? And not only the big drivers, but as we go forward, in terms of the plan. Because, of course, our taxpayer dollars, we're all one of them. My husband tells me all the time, taxes are too high. You need to try to get the taxes down. But at the same time, we have to be realistic because we have great services. Between our public safety, our public facilities and services, we have great services in this town. We can ask anybody who lives outside of West Hartford. So that's one question I have, and then I have another question around the pay to play. So I'm going to pause there.
So if you look at the cuts that are being made, the 3 positions that are additions are all in special ed. And the identification of students in special ed is increasing. The needs maybe, I think post-COVID there were issues, but nationwide it's increasing. One of the things we have no control over is the students that are outplaced. And the outplacement fees have gone up so high, and part of that is because they're having trouble finding staff. There's a major staff shortage, so they can't, to run their business, they need to hire staff to be competitive, they must raise their rates, and so there's some big increases in that. The utilities, a 26% increase in some of the utilities. And then I'm trying to think, The transportation costs were huge. So if you look at all the percentage changes, some items aren't as big in numbers as others, but some are 12, 18%, 26%, and those are things we cannot control. So they're out of our control, so that's some of the bigger changes that I've noticed.
Thank you for that. And then my other question through you, Madam Mayor, is around the pay-to-play, and I appreciate what you reported out in terms of, one, our diversity is increasing, which is a great thing. The number of families in town and the percentage of those whose English is their second language. And so my question around the pay-to-play and the waiver system, how is that information provided to parents or guardians to even inform them that such a thing exists? And the reason why I ask this is I remember when I was on the board, but more importantly, I remember when my kids were playing, because I have two kids at the same time who want to play all the sports. And not only do they want to play all the sports, but all the gear that comes along with it. And then I have an older daughter, and was the same with her, who wants to play all the sports and all the gear that comes with it. And sometimes I know that can put a lot of pressure on families, whether it's a single-parent household or a bi-parent household, because there's other things that you have to provide for the house that are a little more essential. And I know there's a little, what do I want to say? Apprehension or hesitation is probably a better word than to let somebody know that they want to play a sport, but maybe the family can't really afford it, and they don't want to be that kid or that student that's singled out. And we all know how that works. I don't have to go there. So essentially, that's the question that I'm asking.
Yeah, so I asked that directly, and we, Renee and I both went online, registered our child for a sport that we weren't going to have them play, but just to see what the process was like. And so I got back screenshots and everything, all the steps that take place. And you click on the registration link for a sport for that season. And as soon as it comes up, there's a forms page. And on the forms, there's health forms and all the forms that are required. So this is a page that anyone doing a sport would have to visit. And when you get to that page, there is a fee waiver form. It states just like that. And on the fee waiver form, there's about 5 lines that you fill out. And then at the bottom, it says, please provide specific reasons why you're applying for an athletic participation waiver. If student is on the free and reduced program, please indicate below. So you never have to speak to a coach. This form is done online in the privacy of your home. And I can't tell you if there are waivers, and I'm assuming there's waivers for unforeseen circumstances, other things. So, because one of the options is if it's free and reduced. So that once they get the form, they approve it immediately. They've approved 100% of the applications at Hall, and Ann was going to contact Connard to confirm their numbers. The system automatically emails parents that they should complete the registration process, and they would get a thing that says your teen has been approved for a full waiver for the school year or the spring catalog. Please complete your registration. If you have any questions, contact us.
Follow up through you, Madam Mayor, and then I promise this is the last question. What if the family, and I'm going to assume because I know of the electronics that's available, but what if the family does not have a computer or do have access to Wi-Fi? Is that information provided to them ahead of time so they don't feel away because they can't complete something online?
You bring up a very good point in terms of access, if there's a family that does not have a computer. And we know that's something that was faced right at the beginning of the pandemic when there was virtual learning. And provisions were made to provide those students with an access to a device for those means of communication. But you're asking outside of that, are there other ways that's communicated? And I believe so. I cannot say concretely 100% yes, because I'm not in those classrooms, but I believe so. Why? Because the intent is to be inclusive of all students who want to participate in sports. No child has been turned away because they want to participate in sports. And so we know for many sports they have the information session for the students and then information session for the parents as well, albeit counted early Saturday morning with one. And the information is conveyed that way as well. But the mindset is not to be exclusionary, it's to be inclusive. And as Claire has described, the way in which to sign, one way of signing up is to try to maintain as much anonymity as possible, as opposed to, as you described, having to go physically to an office and publicly request. It's trying to do it in a way that's humbling and inclusive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Zadanowitz.
Sure, thank you. I'm not making any promises how long. I'm going to. But thank you for coming here today. Great presentation, very articulate. So there's two town council members for edification here on this right now that were introduced the removing the pay to play, and that was Deb and I back when we were on the Board of Ed to remove that because we saw that. You know, quite honestly, in my humble opinion, I think it's one of the better mental health breaks you can have is to play sports. You know, you're in school all day, you get out there in the team environment, you run off, you get some steam off and things like that. So I think it's a great part of the reason during the pandemic. I think it's a great release, quite honestly. All my kids have participated in sports since they were very young, and we're very fortunate here in West Hartford too. And I don't want to steal any thunder, but Jeff Billings over at Hall does a great job. Both teams do, actually, both schools do. But Hall has the distinction of being the largest cross-country team in all of the state. And they don't turn anybody away for waivers or anything like that. And to also give a personal note, too, I do know that some students had come to a particular couple coaches outside of the regular computer and free and reduced lunch. And, you know, maybe it was the case. I can't remember. It was a while ago, but maybe the parents didn't want to get involved. No, you can't play. I can't get your rides or whatever it was. But he didn't want the parent to know that they were asking for free to pay to play, and the coach handled it very appropriately. So there's that avenue of approach too. Is there's that is too. And I remember that couple of distinct stories back in the day. Because I do help out quite a bit with sports. So anyway, we did get support of the bipartisanly to support that, and I understand that they went back into taking it away to go to the mental health. So all good stuff, and I appreciate you guys talking about it today. And you talk about social economic things, you know, the thing that in sports, you know, pay to play is one thing, right? But think about it, you know, if you're a runner, you got to pay for sneakers, and they're expensive, but that's about it. Basketball, not so much, except for some of the uniforms and things like that. But if you play hockey, hockey's a very expensive sport, and I don't know if we can do any help with that, or, but that's not necessarily the school responsibility, because you have to start at a much younger age. But maybe it's something in the town that we can do. But anyway, I digress. I just you guys were talking so much about this, and just to give you, you know, why I have gray hairs too, because when I'm looking at these numbers, and I've looked at them for a long time now. When I first came in, we were at 9,100 students. When I joined, we were at 10,700 students, as I remember. So in the 80s, I think the mayor, you gave statistics, or somebody did. Our population in the 80s was like much more than it is now, right? Like almost 10,000 more or more than that?
No, it was 70,000.
But it was more then. It was definitely more. So I'm just surprised at that statistic even in the 80s. But anyway, one of the questions I do have is, as much as I wanted to go line item by line item with this over the last week and a half, but I just wanted to understand, do the ESSER funds show up in the budget either in money or position or both? And if they do or don't, are they outlined? I didn't go line item by line. I'm just kind of reaching out to see if it, for you.
Sure, they're in a different section of the budget, and the majority of the ESSER funding has gone towards positions. And in terms of for what's being proposed for the next year, it's reducing about 10 positions. So 27 will remain. Again, recognizing the majority of those positions have been in support of our mental health supports. So come this time next year, when ESSER funding is no longer, those positions are dependent on that funding, and so we will have to explore other ways of responding to the needs that are still going to be present.
It's under Section H.
Okay.
Special
Yes.
funds,
Yeah, I'll look at that. Thank you.
and that's 27
Okay.
for next year that we will have to replace.
Okay, thank you. And then in the special instruction, the modifications on this page, so these are the, for special instruction, -3 teachers, and
Yes.
that is some of that ESSER funding that,
No.
no? That ran out, or?
No, for the special instruction, that pertains to the addition, actually, of an occupational therapist, the addition of a speech and language pathologist, an intensive academic teacher, 2 resource teachers, and then the teaching assistants. That is where it will be modified. So it's again, we're recognizing where there is a need, but where we can try to check and balance the needs as well. So the net result is the 3 positions.
3
Elimination.
eliminations?
eliminations, yes.
Okay, all right. And that has nothing to do with the ESSER funds running out from the first allocation, right?
I do not believe so.
Because I think we're there, right?
I
For the-
don't, I
Where are
know
we?
many of the staffing modifications were because of, just as you referenced, the student population decreasing as well. And so many of those adjustments recognized how there aren't as many students that are being serviced in those particular areas. But the bulk of the ESSER funding, again, ESSER was specifically for pieces manifesting from the pandemic, were for mental health supports and to address our learning gaps also, learning loss.
All right, thank you. And I'll just close with this. I had the opportunity some years ago to speak at Convocation, and oftentimes when we get all these accolades for the town, it always goes to the high school. You know, oh, the high schools are this, the high schools are that. Well, if you think about it, and I said this in this speech, is that a high school is really a final home. It's the beginning. So your elementary schools and your middle schools are the ones that have helped build that home. And in construction process, you know, they first picked out a spot, digged a foundation, you know, cultivated the trees and plantings around the house. So in that sense, you know, all these accusations, and when we opened up, and we're all aware of how well West Hartford schools are, and it is our gold standard. We always talk about it. But I don't think enough credit goes to the elementary and middle schools, and I always want to bring that up because the high schools always get it. But it's a family, it's a team, and at the end of the day, they build a warm home, if you will, in the construction process of making a student successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zdanowitz. Then we'll go to Mr. Winograd.
Thank you very much. Great thing to talk about with our schools. I don't have to pile on in terms of praise. Duffy, Sedgwick, and Conard for me, and they've always been great. Used to spend a lot more. I remember back when I went in 1970, we were the highest per pupil in the state, and it's amazing what we've been able to accomplish since then and continuing, and appreciate all your leadership on what you've been doing, not only for work on this piece on the budget, but also for really turning our school system into a model for equity, and not just, you know, we know our diversity numbers, but it's not just about diversity. It's working through that and doing as much as you can to improve the lives of our students. And I thank you for that. I do want to make a couple of comments. One on Alberto's comments on the population. It looks like, I'm looking at, in the budget document, it actually looks like we're actually adding this year. I'm seeing the district-wide enrollment numbers, B1 of the budget. Right, we're adding one, but even looking back at the 10-1-22 projection, so the projection for last year was actually off by 180, and you ended up with 180 more students than anticipated in last year's budget. And that's a big change. So, and we didn't hear you come back and ask for more money for that. So, if you want to comment on that, I just.
Absolutely, sir.
Very good point. That was a surprise to many of us, in that we realized that we had many more students, kindergartners, to come in last year compared to the previous years. Why? Because when we were at the heat of the pandemic, many chose not to begin formalizing that process just yet. But come last year, more folks were ready to do that, and we welcomed that. So yes, very good observation. Very good observation.
And even for next year, so the K-12, we're adding one person, the projection for, so we'll call that even. But even for the total enrollment, including the other programs, losing 8, which again is basically even. So to that extent, I don't think, we're dealing with a dropping population. And just to the comment made about other towns in Dirk B or really throughout the state, I mean, that's my day job. It's dropping everywhere. And actually, one of the reasons, and my colleagues will groan, but one of the reasons we're not in the same boat as a lot of places are is that we're putting the commitment into housing and really trying to push, it's one reason we're pushing for the growth agenda is in fact to, avoid that sort of drop that is really a sign of, not a healthy community. And we're resisting that, I think, pretty strongly. So I will say, the trends are smaller. 1970, we peaked at population. We actually had fewer households at the time, but the families were bigger. So I mean, some of that is just we have more families here than we used to. We just have smaller families, and that's going to obviously have an impact on the size. And I'll also note, obviously, when you lose a few students in one grade or another, it doesn't save you any money at all because it doesn't necessarily mean you can reduce staff. It isn't like you lose 30 in one grade and can actually reduce. So we do actually, one of our great strengths is our economies of scale, and that we're big enough where we can take extra people and really does not cost that much on a marginal basis because we can fit into the existing vacancies. So with that said, again, I think take more credit than even you're taking for managing a budget with, without losing students. The one thing I do want to go back to the pay-to-play issue. Sorry, I just want to be clear if I have my numbers right on that. I'm looking in the budget book, and it looks like this is H2 of our book. For the actual 21-22 fiscal data, and that's under the ESSER grant summary. It lists waiver of sports and activities fee, $414,000, or 415. Is that what we're talking about? Is there any other money that was being put towards the waiver, or is that the amount that you had in the budget to waive fees that is not there?
Correct, yes.
And did that cover all of them, or is that not?
So the year prior, it covered all of it.
Okay.
Last year, we split that in half, and half went towards the pay-to-play. The other half went towards staffing the positions for mental health supports.
Okay. So when you made the comment, $500,000 what would be the amount to eliminate any?
Right.
pay to play.
Yes, so what is projected for next year, the amount would be $508,781.
Okay.
So 508,781.
And where is that?
That is, this, the actual pay to play, all of that is in a separate.
Separate, okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'll just add on to what Mark said. Obviously, that we all know about the values of pay to play. I will say, when I first got elected, I went to a talk by Robert Putnam, most famous for Bowling Alone, with, what's his name? Blanking on his name. Formal council person. I know. Chris Barnes. And we both were fans of Robert Putnam. But Putnam had another book out on the inequities in education in various communities. And on the write-ups, and he said it at that night, in the write-ups of that book, the thing he got angriest about was pay to play. And all the other things that and he's going through great inequities of the town he grew up in, and that was one where he actually got kind of emotional about it, the problems of that. And it was interesting because a former Board of Ed member was there who had been involved in putting pay to play originally. And I sat, behind him, and you could just see him sag, like the horrible decision. And he understood, what he'd had to have done to put that in. And so, certainly the priority of getting rid of it. You've heard it enough, and I think we're all hoping at some level to be able to eliminate it. Just on that, and final, just one last point I want to make on that. I think the numbers you gave, it sounded like about 10% of students were asking for the waiver. Did I get those numbers right?
The waivers are per season.
Right.
So that number isn't student per sport. So the 2,600, we're believing that's a sport. 2,600 participants in sport. We're not sure how many kids that is.
Okay.
So that could be, if you play a sport every year, you
Right.
could cut that number in half.
Right.
And we have around just under 3,000 students, so there's not going to be 2,600 students in sports.
Right.
So it must,
And so are we comparing, so when you talk about 200 and something waivers, would that be also per sport, or would that be total?
I think it's total, or it's based
So
on
like you only
season.
put a waiver, I guess what I heard was about 10%, which would seem to be pretty low when 26% are eligible for free and reduced lunch. I guess that was my point, that it seemed like
Yeah.
a low percentage. If it actually is a percentage of all those playing are getting the waiver, then we have a lot of people potentially who would be eligible for the waiver who aren't getting it. But maybe those numbers aren't, I can't
Well,
use them that way.
I'm curious, out of the 3,000 students, are there kids that don't play sports?
Sure.
And focus on music and arts and wouldn't go for a high school sports team? And there are people who that's not their forte, and they do other things. So I wouldn't expect that 26% of the kids who play free and reduced lunch that it'd be 20%, because I'm assuming that, there's a percentage of kids that don't do sports.
Right. No, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I'm just trying to figure out whether we can tell from the numbers whether everybody who should be participating is, and it's a little hard to tell from that. I'm not sure if there's any other way to find that out. But certainly, if as we hope, those eligible for reduced lunches are participating in sports at the same percentage or seeking to as everybody else, then you'd expect that you'd have at least 26 and more of the participants being waived. And I'm not sure whether that's happening or not. So again, I just wonder whether or not how that's tracked and whether it is as effective a program as we hope it is. But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. I was looking for an article that I had read in U.S. News and World Report recently, and talking about participation this was more by race than by socioeconomic. But I think a lot of it is to Mr. Zdanowicz's point, is that the access, the reason that we don't see is, it's also somewhat in music and competitive music programs too, that private lessons, musical instruments, yes, we have certain things that'll allow, but there's access issues all along, and we need to be aware of them for sure. But anyway, Ms. Pullen? Nothing? Okay. Ms. McGinnis?
Hi. Thank you guys so much for, what you do and for coming here tonight. And I hate to ask another question about pay to play, but I just want to clarify something in the budget. So for 22-23, it looks like there was $185,000 allotted to pay down the fee so that the fee wasn't as much. In the current budget, is that money being moved over to support mental health, or is that money not there anymore? Because there isn't any money in the budget, on that budget line, for waiver of sports and activity fees for 23-24.
Yes, in that, currently, the amount of ESSER funding that is going towards to offset the pay-to-play is $218,250. And the pay-to-play amount is the $290,732. So it's been a shared expense. What is being proposed for next year, or rather what has been allocated for next year, is the ESSER funding. There will not be ESSER funding going towards the pay-to-play. It will be the full reinstatement of the $508,781. And with that would have a return of $175 per sport, with a return of a cap of $700. And this was how it was back in 2017-2018, where it was a cap of $700 per family. And so that is what it is being proposed. However, we'll reiterate, and I'm actually very glad to continue to receive questions about pay-to-play, because it's highlighting all the more how we collectively don't care for it. And so the only way to remove that is by increasing the budget to account for pay-to-play. Therefore, that will not be a burden on the families.
One other question, just to clarify for myself. Do you have to qualify for free and reduced lunch to be able to get a fee waiver? Or can it be, your parents lost your job, you don't have any income coming in at the time?
All of the above.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. McGinnis. All right. Are there any other questions? Okay. I don't obviously hear any questions at the table. Do you have any questions for us?
No, not so much a question. I'm just very concerned about how much these funds, the ESSER funds, have helped our students. And we're doing school tours right now, and I went to see 2 elementary schools, and both principals remarked about how much the counseling matters, and some of the reading support and the math support, the coaches that we've brought in. We've done so many things to help with the learning loss, but as a teacher, it is not a quick fix. And the social emotional outbursts and problems that we see among our typical children, not the special kids with special needs. And so the service providers of the special ed service providers, the psychologists and behavioralists, are now not having to handle as many of the counseling issues and the outbursts that kids are having. It's a very hard time. And I'm hoping that the state or the federal government does some kind of extension or some kind of additional help. I know the district's looking very closely at any grant opportunities, and there's a lot of people looking, and they jump on them right away. But with 27 positions, looking to eliminate next year and not being able to fund with ESSER, it's going to be a hard budget season next year. And I don't think our kids are going to be where we want them to be and take those positions away.
Okay, Mr. Zadanos.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. Do you feel, and I personally have no statistical data at this at all, it's just a feeling, that since, you saw this wave of mental health issues and special need issues arise during the pandemic and things like that. And I remember when the ESSER funds came in and, if we inundated the school with resources in 3 years, they'll, that'll help a lot. And then at the time where it comes to remove the ESSER funds and remove those special positions, we'll be in much better shape. And I don't know if we're there yet or not, and I don't know if you guys know this, but I've been subbing in schools for a little bit now, and I suggest if I had to go back and do my Board of Ed stuff, I had 3 kids in the school system, I would have subbed for a couple days just to do it, really, quite honestly, as a board member. It's eye-opening, it's fun, and it's interesting. But I guess my question to you, and I have no empirical data, but I just have this gut feeling that that I think the kids are better adjusted over the last 3 years now. Like, they're not worse now. And I'm not saying we get rid of everything tomorrow. That's not my point. It's just that, do you see that light at the end of the tunnel? I don't know if it gets down to your, if that kind of information gets to you, but just being in the schools now every day as I am, I think that there is improvement. And nothing, no statistics, nothing, but it just, do you think it's working, I guess, is all, everything that we've provided through ESSER funds and helping the students? I think I see it, but I'm just asking if you guys see it.
I most definitely see improvements. I also see that the work in mental health and social emotional learning and the teaming that's happening and the sense of community is doing more to make kids ready to learn than to jump right in on academic recovery. That academic recovery is happening, but it's slow. What's more critical is the kids feeling safe and feeling ready to learn and not disrupting classes. So I do think everything we're doing is good, and I think we're seeing progress. It's just, I don't think we knew how much of an impact it was on the kids, and especially our little ones coming in. Those toddlers and babies were not interacting with people. And so now they're entering kindergarten without the foundation that a lot of our high school kids had, because they could go to play groups and play dates, and they had a lot more time as little children to play and interact. And speech is a challenge more for the younger kids. There's a lot of things. So we're seeing some new things. And I'm talking from my experience every day as a teacher, but I also know in visiting the schools, they're very happy with all the supports, and I do think there's progress, but it's not as fast as we hoped.
And I'll if I may
Yes, please.
respond as well, and I appreciate the question and the observation, Mark, because yes, you are observing progress. However, progress does not mean let's now extract out what helped us get to a place of progress. In terms of applying the ESSER funding, it was crisis mode, essentially. It was trying to intervene. When you think of the different levels of intervention or prevention, you have primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary is where it's kind of a wide brush. You kind of expose all to whatever, to try to prevent whatever challenges may be. Secondary is, okay, we recognize we have some that are at risk. Let's now try to intervene to assert and support them. Tertiary is, okay, that we have some challenges, some issues. We now need to work on trying to restabilize. The ESSER funding was responding in a secondary and tertiary level of intervention. And although we are more stable now, we are not completely there. And so being able to continue to keep those supportive services and staff that were helping us to get stable is going to prolong the effect of that all the more. And just want to share again from the presentation that was given, from mental health supports that were provided in the elementary school system. In terms of elementary school counselors, they were engaging on a very frequent basis. Thus far, over 380 individual students have been serviced, individual students. And these are ones that did not initially qualify for special education services. Again, services have been provided for those students who may not have met the criteria for needing special education services. And 314 classroom sessions were provided by our elementary school mental health supports. They've done things such as held individual parent consultations, held community-based referrals, gave presentations at PTO nights, and in terms of the mental health coordinator, she's held mid-year meetings each week with each building. So it's not just providing services, it's also trying to provide and promote psychoeducation as well, from a preventative standpoint. And so the gains of that, we can continue to optimize them by having them in place. And so our conversations next year will continue to be robust because what is currently funding them will not be there. But it doesn't mean the challenges will also not be there. And if I must also say, I also heard from a little birdie that you were substitute teaching. I had someone that said, I thought I saw.
I did, and I recognized your daughter, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. And I knew, I said, oh, okay. And I didn't want to embarrass her or anything like that.
She appreciates that.
So, yes, and that's what, so I did see her, yes.
Okay. So that's really awesome. So, all right, anything?
I'm sorry,
Sure,
make a closing comment,
absolutely,
pardon me.
absolutely.
I just, again, want to thank all of you for your time and your attention in receiving and hearing where we are and where we would like to go. We know that whenever it comes to talking about dollars and cents, can be a difficult conversation, but we don't have to have it to be that way. And I think if we continue to remember who the dollars are for, hopefully that will help us all the more in our path forward. It's for our young people. It's for our children. And I will say what I shared last night at the conclusion of our budget workshop. If what took place this week at a national level has not reminded us of how precious life is and how we cannot take it for granted, and we know that we are honored as Board of Education members that one of our 3 primary charges is to establish the budget. But it's more than just numbers. These numbers are associated with people, children that will grow up to be adults. And so we thank you for your time, attention, and compassion.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your work every day and your commitment to our students. Obviously, we have to balance all of this with the concerns and of many families that are challenged by inflation and so many things, but we will do our best. So thank you so much, and have a good night, everybody. We are now adjourned.